Where a Mind Wanders by Velvet Heart. The curtains were drawn, a deep red too thin to keep the radiant sunlight from pouring in through the sheer cloth, bathing the mostly bare room in crimson. A single tiny wooden table, barely the size of a serving tray, held two orbs, one silver and one gold, although the light filtering through the curtains left both of them in deep shades of gleaming orange. Familiarity rushed forth in Twilight Sparkle's chest as she stepped into the practice room, her gaze trailing the familiar marks along the wall. Pale white paint covering where the stone was once worn by magic of days long past. Accidental scorch marks and cracks that trailed from floor to ceiling, now hidden by the work of skilled repair ponies. Finally, her eyes alighted on the two orbs prepared for her. She'd seen these spheres many times before, lurking memories taking her on a momentary journey of nostalgia to a time years past. Back then, a tiny purple foal, pressed nervously against the side of one of Princess Celestia's hooves, spent hours attempting to hold both of them airborne simultaneously. What once came as a challenge, though, now came with barely a thought. Just to measure her growing strength, Twilight flicked both orbs up in the air with a quick gesture of her horn, giving them a swift swirl through the air before setting them back down on the table. Just as the two spheres landed with a soft click, the door opened again to allow access to a graceful white form, folded wings brushing slightly against the doorframe as she slid her large body through a doorway that was just a fraction smaller than was comfortable. Even that she did with a grace that would have made photo finish weep with joy. "My dear faithful student," Princess Celestia crooned, the door closing behind her with naught but a swift gesture of that delicate flute of a horn and a soft click. "Are you ready for your next lesson?" Twilight Sparkle quickly bobbed her head, but hesitated as she glanced at those balls she practiced with so often as a foal. "I am, but the sun and the moon balls, I thought I outgrew those years ago. Why did you have those prepared?" The princess's serene smile remained untouched as she calmly set down a paper-clad package, resting it on the floor. "You will see, Twilight Sparkle. This lesson is an advanced form of what you were taught as a foal. Come, let me see you pick up the sun and moon again, just like in the old days." The small purple unicorn was not one to question her teacher, and with a casual ease, she brought sun and moon, the two metal orbs no bigger than a toy ball, to a perfect standstill in midair. "Yes, Princess. What next?" "Now hold them there, student. No matter what happens, this is a test of focus and concentration," the alicorn crooned, her horn glowing softly as she channeled a minuscule fraction of her power through it. Paper crinkled as the package she'd brought with her unraveled, unveiling a tome that levitated smoothly up to Celestia's face. Twilight couldn't help but lean a little into Celestia's leg as the princess moved to stand next to her, the gesture seemingly perfectly in place in this nostalgic moment. Twilight Sparkle was nothing if not a good student, though, so after a moment of personal indulgence, she turned her focus firmly to the unwavering sun and moon. Farspotter's hooves beat the steps in a steady, distance-eating drum, his chest heaving as he climbed the thousands of steps up into the magical tower. Outside, thunder rolled, the uncontrolled magical storm called forth by the unnamed one, rumbling with intimidating power. The princess's voice was as smooth as silk, interrupted only by the soft crinkle of paper as she turned the page. The little unicorn, however, felt like she'd been hit in the back of the head with a frying pan. "Farspotter? But I don't ever remember reading that part. That's..." She couldn't help but glance to the side, eyes finding the title on the cover. Farspotter and the Phoenix of the Void. A soft little squeal escaped Twilight before she could restrain it. That book wasn't even in the stores yet. Fillies lined up in front of the bookstores around the block for the newest Farspotter book, and somehow, the princess had acquired the newest work by Quill Howling before the media machine even got a whiff of it. Was she going to spoil it for her? Wait, was she reading from the beginning? Was this for her? Distracted, The moon orb wobbled slightly before Twilight Sparkle caught herself and turned her focus back to her levitation spell. The princess's smile turned vaguely knowing, almost a little smirk, as she continued reading.
The door slammed open, the stallion smashing it shut behind him to keep out the dark winds that howled longingly past the windows. The presence of their evil made the lightning bolt scar on his cheek ache faintly, bringing haste to his actions. Inside the tower, he rushed up the final steps to... There was the sound of paper folding as the page turned, and then another papery sound as Princess Celestia, unbeknownst to Twilight Sparkle, slipped a scroll into the book and continued reading from it without skipping a beat. Find himself once again in Brightheart's chambers, the filly laying still in her magic-induced eternal slumber. I'm here, Farspotter whispered as he approached the bed. I have the counter curse now, the power that will wake you. His horn glowed, casting its light through the dark room as he touched it to Brightheart's lips, and then smoothly touched his lips to hers.
Twilight gasped. This was it, the moment the whole series had been leading up to. Brightheart and Farspotter would be reunited, and together they would start the battle against the unnamed one. The unicorn filly couldn't help but do an excited little dance with her hind legs in anticipation. This book, the climax of the story, and Princess Celestia was reading it to her before any of the fillies of Canterlot would even know it existed.
Her eyes, glorious, heavenly blue, slowly opened, lips pressed together as magic and love together began slowly unweaving the dark spell. Brightheart could feel the weight of the curse lifting from her chest as her savior shared his breath with hers, his mouth with hers. Princess Celestia lowered her head, her lips ever so slightly brushing the back of Twilight's ear as she continued her story, voice growing huskier as every word brought the soft flow of her warm breath to tickle along the length of the unicorn's ear shell. She can feel his warmth against her, his steady heartbeat as the gentle touch became a true, deep kiss. Oh, Spotter, she whispered as their lips finally abandoned each other. She was silenced by his touch as he leaned close. You don't have to tell me anything, Brightheart. I love you, deeply, truly. I fought through 100 night spirits. I climbed the mystical mountain. I sought out the secrets of the unicorn sage. I did it all for you.
A love confession. Everything was coming together. It was going to. Twilight quickly caught herself as she almost dropped the sunball. She had to keep her focus. That was what this test was for. But Farspotter. Twilight Sparkle owned every single book up to this one. She camped in front of the Canterlot bookstores for each sequel. She wrote wild fan fictions in her spare time. And now...
Oh, Spotter. I love you too. I need you. I need you so badly my heart feels like it's about to burst. Brightheart couldn't find her words, but Farspotter didn't need any. He leaned forward and kissed her again. No magic was needed to send fireworks down Brightheart's spine, her tail flagging with the sudden intensity as she found her face flushing. Farspotter's powerful forelegs landed on the bed, leaving him towering over the laying filly. Brightheart's flush grew deeper still as she gazed down his belly and saw his impressive...
Another page turned, but Twilight Sparkle couldn't hear the sound of the paper through the sudden roar of her heartbeat in her ears. Her cheeks flushed, growing almost as hot as her burning ears as the story suddenly took a turn for the distinctly naughty. Many a night had the filly spent fantasizing about things like this, being in Brightheart's place when the magical kiss of Farspotter's lips brought her back to a world of love and passion. Her legs quivered as Princess Celestia's warm, husky voice caressed her ear with things she'd never imagined coming from between those pale, graceful lips.
Farspotter's large frame found its way onto Brightheart's back, softly and lovingly nuzzling at the mare's ears and lightly trailing his tongue along the pearly length of her horn. His swelling stallionhood smacked Brightheart's flank audibly, swelling visibly even as the mare's heartbeat picked up the pace, her ears burning with her arousal. Whimpering her longing, she clambered up, hind hooves coming to rest on the carpet with muffled clops while her fore hooves braced against the bed. Farspotter rumbled, teeth nibbling along the back of her neck as she shifted, and rested his powerful chest on Brightheart's hindquarters.
A sudden weight on Twilight Sparkle's hind end startled her out of her glazed-eyed daze, followed by a soft pressure against the back of her neck as the open book came to rest on her withers. Princess Celestia, in order to add more authenticity to the erotic scene, had moved to stand behind Twilight and lightly straddled the smaller pony's hindquarters. She only needed to rest a small amount of her chest above the base of Twilight's tail to equal the weight of a proper stallion, and she could feel her student's tail swish aside in an instinctive response.
Princess?
Twilight Sparkle whimpered in confusion, both of the levitating orbs wobbling.
Shh. Keep your focus.
Celestia murmured before bringing her snout down to lightly nibble along the back of Twilight's neck, sending shivers down the unicorn's spine. Small, glistening droplets began appearing on the floor between Twilight Sparkle's hind legs, and telling a hint of what was happening not far above that spot.
His weight settled on her lounging back. He finally leaned forward to whisper, "I've wanted this for so long," with an intense love leaving his voice pregnant with longing. His powerful hindquarters tightened, stallionhood slapping Brightheart's lower belly once, twice. Then he found her velvet, intimate valley. He pressed forward, gently caressing his girth, slowly spreading her open as her fluids trickled down his lengthened, thin, slow rivulets.
Twilight gasped, the sound trailing off into a quiet moan as she found herself caught in her powerful imagination, as if it were a spell, imagining herself in Brightheart's place. A slight tightening of the princess's hindquarters, and Celestia began slowly rocking her hips, deepening the impression of a stallion rutting.
His stallionhood smoothly drove deeper into Brightheart's passionate depths, unexplored moist inner walls spread by his hot shaft, each beat of his heart sending a pulse along the firm length into the mare's craving depths. The thrusts grew in speed, then in desperation as Farspotter clamped his strong jaws around Twilight Sparkle's mane. "Oh, Spotter!" The mare whimpered, a hot fire blooming in her lower belly, growing in intensity with the frantic pistoning of Farspotter into her moist depths. "Oh, Twilight," he rumbled through a mouthful of mane.
The little unicorn was too caught up with the fantasy to notice the princess sneakily replacing Brightheart's name with hers. Her forelegs clapped against the floor as she braced herself, hind legs spreading slightly, going rigid in preparation for Farspotter's imaginary stallionhood. Princess Celestia could feel Twilight Sparkle's tail base brushing against her chest, lifted, pushing aside in a swelling, passionate craving. The moonball landed on the ground with a soft thump, startling Twilight out of her fantasy for a moment as she found herself losing focus. Immediately, she glared at the wobbling sun orb and forced it to hover perfectly still, embarrassed even if her flush went unseen through the heat of arousal in her cheeks. Celestia didn't look up from her book, though, and continued reading, quickly reabsorbing her student with the warm flow of her generous voice.
His thrusting grew feral, passion overwhelming them both as he lost his rhythm and shoved himself into Twilight with unquenchable desire. It didn't take much longer. A gasp echoed from Twilight's mouth, choked off into a moan that, in turn, grew into a loud scream as the ball of passionate fire in her loins expanded and exploded into orgasm. Farspotter's dominant scream was like a roar in the small room at the top of the tower, his shaft twitching, pulsing as he washed her depths in his pearly essences. For long minutes they simply clung together, droplets of gleaming sweat rolling from Farspotter's heaving sides. It could not last forever, but his passion was not yet spent.
The book slid off of Twilight Sparkle's back, suddenly ignored as Princess Celestia backed away slightly.
He let himself slowly slip from Twilight's back, whispering sweet nothings to her, before his warm breath suddenly brushed across the moist folds of her flushed sex.
Twilight Sparkle suddenly went distinctly wide-eyed as she felt Farspotter's breath on her own sex, before the sudden realization snapped in place.
"Princess!"
she squealed. But the god empress of all Equestria was not one to be stopped by a stuttered cry. Farspotter's tail ended suddenly as Celestia occupied her mouth with other things. Soft, delicate kisses trailed along the outer edges of her protege's moistened valley, the warm flesh perfumed with the scent of a wanton filly. Every warm exhalation from Celestia's snout sent a wave of breath across her most sensitive flesh and a quiver up Twilight Sparkle's spine. And that was even before those perfect divine teeth lightly grazed the gleamingly moist, pink inner flesh of Twilight's fillyhood. The unicorn's complaint turned into a moan as she suddenly found a tongue with 1,000 years of experience smoothly trail along her inner folds, teasingly dancing around and across her clitoral hood. An intimate kiss became more so as Celestia's tongue dipped smoothly into Twilight's body, tracing inner walls with a skill of pony lifetimes. Each motion sent sparks of passion up the unicorn's body, swirling into a tightening knot in her lower body. The fiery tension in Twilight's loins swelled and tightened with every stroke of that skilled, royal tongue, but each stroke was lighter, each caress lower, until Celestia reached the swollen, exposed nubbin of the unicorn's clitoris. The lips of the master, moistened with the fluids of the student, finally met the aroused little bulb, direct contact strengthened by a soft suction and a brush of the tongue. Twilight cried out, eyes wide just as the sun crested the windowsill, light pouring unrestrained through the crimson curtains. The unicorn found her hips quivering, tail lashing through the princess's mane as she suddenly found her peak. The thump of the sun orb smacking the floor punctuated Twilight Sparkle's choked-off squeal as she spattered Celestia's graceful throat and chin with a few droplets of her sinful essence. Shudders rippled through the unicorn pony's body as her inner muscles flexed and fluttered fitfully, finding nothing to squeeze as orgasm caused her knees to go weak. A few soft caresses of the princess's tongue sent aftershocks dancing up into her belly, daintily cleansing Twilight Sparkle's warm nethers of the mess she made of herself. With a soft sigh, Princess Celestia lifted her head and positioned herself face to face with the purple pony.
Ah, faithful student, I fear you may have failed the test. Don't worry, you'll get a chance to do it over. For now, though, you may clean my lips for me.
Celestia lowered her head further to nuzzle the tired, sagging, and confused unicorn with a sticky snout.
Don't be too hard on yourself. Every one of my personal protégés throughout time failed this test the first time. And you did the best of all.
Twilight Sparkle sighed as she signed her name under the document with a quick flourish of her levitating quill. It was done. Now to hide it somewhere no pony would find it so she could pull it out on lonely nights, and... The door suddenly thumped open.
Hey, Twilight, I'm home. Is that a letter to the princess? Don't worry, I got this. Spike! No! Wait, oh, no.
Twilight Sparkle whimpered as she watched bright green flames consume her self-insertion Clop fic.